Welcome back to Cindy's Library. I am Cindy. Today we are going to do another Tolkien talk. And today we are going to be discussing The Lord of the Rings. Yes, one of my absolute favorites. Now, the trouble with talking about The Lord of the Rings, it is over 1,000 pages and very long. For those of you who aren't familiar with Lord of the Rings, well, there are many parts to it, but the main story is the story of the hobbit Frodo Baggins and his quest to travel all the way to Mount Doom to destroy the One Ring, the Ring of the Enemy, a ring which can corrupt anyone who uses it, except perhaps its maker, Sauron, but he's already corrupted anyway, so and of course there are many wonderful characters there. We get to see Bilbo a bit from The Hobbit, only many years later. Gandalf, of course, has an important part, and we are introduced to Strider, aka Aragorn, son of Arathorn. Many wonderful parts, and I don't want to ramble on too long about Lord of the Rings. There's a ton that I could say. But, well, there are several things that make Lord of the Rings special. One of those is the memorable characters. Frodo's servant, Sam Gamgee. I guess I should say servant slash friend, Sam Gamgee. Strider is quite memorable. Gollum makes an appearance again, and he is quite an interesting and complex character. Gandalf is always fun to have. We got some new characters like Galadriel and Eowyn that are great. Elrond makes an appearance again, for those who are familiar with The Hobbit. The other thing I would say, well, another thing that makes The Lord of the Rings special is the lovely descriptions of the landscape. Just reading them, you know that Tolkien really visualized Middle Earth, and he also loved our world and had spent a fair amount of time observing it and even painting it a bit and drawing it. And it shows in his verbal descriptions. He never considered himself much of an artist, but he was at least an amateur artist, and he definitely had an artistic eye, and it shows in all of his descriptions. But probably what Tolkien is most known for is his world building. Incredibly wide world, deep world. It seems like the more you dig into it, the more there is to find. And let's be honest, it helps that Tolkien had been working on the first stage of Middle Earth for decades at this point. And so he had a lot of that material to draw on, all of which can be found in the Silmarillion, which we will be talking about one of these days, which I also love. But with that foundation of all the Silmarillion material that he'd been working on for decades, it was easy for him to create a sense of depth for his world. And any of you who are up for a Silmarillion challenge, after reading the Silmarillion, you should reread The Lord of the Rings and see how many references to the Silmarillion you can catch. I'll give you one for free. Baron and Luthien, one of my favorites. And we'll have to talk about that another time. But and Tolkien is also amazingly quotable. So many great quotes in all of his works, but especially The Lord of the Rings. Oh, let's see. I can find it. Da, 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 da. Well, this isn't the one I was looking for, but Frodo says here, what a pity that Bilbo did not stab that vile creature when he had a chance. Pity, answers Gandalf. It was pity that stayed his hand, pity and mercy, not to strike without need, and he has been well rewarded, Frodo. Be sure that he took so little hurt from the evil and escaped in the end because he began his ownership of the ring so, with pity. I am sorry, said Frodo, but I am frightened and I do not feel any pity for Gollum. You have not seen him, Gandalf broke in. No, and I don't want to, said Frodo. I can't understand you. Do you mean to say that you and the elves have let him live on after all those horrible deeds? Now, at any rate, he is as bad as an orc and just an enemy. He deserves death. Deserves it, answers Gandalf. I dare say he does. Many that live deserve death, and some that die deserve life. Can you give it to them? Then do not be too eager to deal out death in judgment, for even the very wise cannot see all ends. I have not much hope that Gollum can be cured before he dies, but there is a chance of it. And my and he is bound up with the fate of the ring. My heart tells me he has some part to play yet, for good or ill, before the end, and when that comes, the pity of Bilbo may rule the fate of many, yours not least. So, such wonderful writing. Oh, let's see. Oh, I'm not finding the other one I wanted to do, so I'll just have to do it from memory. This is from Gandalf again. Frodo says, I wish it need not have happened in my time, meaning finding the One Ring. Gandalf says, so do I, and so do all who live in such times, but that is not for us to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us. Wonderful, wonderful. Oh, a bit of background on The Lord of the Rings for those who are interested. Oh, Tolkien was really interested in getting the Silmarillion published, but thanks to C.S. Lewis and among others, he was convinced to finish The Hobbit, which he had started as a story for his children, which he told them in the winter evenings. And The Hobbit did fairly well enough that the publisher wanted a second Hobbit. And Tolkien showed them some other things, including some Silmarillion material. Publisher came back and said, thanks, but we really want a second Hobbit. So Tolkien sat down about a year after The Hobbit came out and he started writing The Long Expected Party. At first, he wasn't sure at all where the story was going to go, but he found the ring as a connecting point between The Hobbit and a story that could be told after The Hobbit. And the more he wrote, the more he started connecting it with the Silmarillion material until he just gave up and basically made it all the same world, just different ages. But well, he started writing The Lord of the Rings, or as he called it back then, the Hobbit sequel, in 1937, I want to say. Oh, it was not finished until 1947, 1948. To be fair, there was a lot that happened between those times, in particular World War II, which disrupted everyone, even someone like Tolkien, who was not directly involved with the war effort. Oh, he was involved in civil defense for his area, patrolling on certain nights. He had to increase his workload as professors who were younger than him were sent to work directly on the war effort in one way or another. He had several sons in the war, which I'm sure caused him a great amount of worry at that time too, along with the more general worries that everyone had. Well, and with professors leaving, not only his academic load would be increased, but his administrative load would increase as well. So, yes, it took him a long time to actually finish The Lord of the Rings. And then it took him a few more years to go through, revise, and edit everything, double check everything, actually type it out when he did not know how to type with 10 fingers. So, upshot is that The Fellowship of the Ring and The Two Towers were not published until 1953, and The Return of the King came out the next year in 1954. So, beyond that, there were paper shortages, which complicated trying to find a publisher. And for a while, he was insisting on wanting to publish Silmarillion at the same time. Allen and Unwin said no, so he went to Milton Waldman. He showed some interest, but eventually that interest petered out. And so he went back to Allen and Unwin, and finally he agreed to let only the Lord of the Rings be published. So all of that took time too. So, but it was so worth it. Rainier Unwin, he was the son of Sir Stanley Unwin, the publisher at Allen and Unwin. Rainier, well, I'll have to wait till The Hobbit till I talk about how he began his relationship with Tolkien, but he was indeed, he worked very closely with Tolkien on The Lord of the Rings. And when The Lord of the Rings was finally completed and he was able to finally read it, he wrote basically to his father, basically saying, I don't know if it will sell, but this is a work of genius. And his father wrote back saying, you are allowed to lose money if it is a work of genius. So that is a nice point there. And ever since then, the Lord of the Rings has been on the radar of those who love imaginative worlds. It had very good sales to begin with, but really took off in the 60s when Ace put out a trade paperback. They thought they could, maybe technically they could, but Tolkien wasn't getting any royalties, so he did enough revisions that they could re-put it under copyright and allowed Valentine Books to publish it in paperback form and asked everyone to buy that version. And, well, all hype is good hype in advertising, so, yep, really exploded then here in the US. It's been popular the world over. You can find editions in many different languages and many different nations, which is fun for collectors of foreign editions. So, I think that's all that I have to say today on The Lord of the Rings. So, thank you for stopping by for this Tolkien Talks here at Cindy's Library. I truly do appreciate everyone who stops by. If you've read Lord of the Rings, I'd love to hear what you have to say about it. And feel free to leave comments and suggestions. And until next time, I hope we all stay safe and healthy. And as always, happy reading.